Napoleon Bonaparte, the name is like a historical hymn that records the adventures, conquests and frustrations of a man. He was a lion in the wilderness, a dark horse in the long history, and a legendary figure in our eternal memory. Napoleon was born in 1769 in the city of Ajaccio, on the island of Corsica. This island, once part of Genoa, was sold to France. It was in the midst of these changing times that Napoleon was born. His father, Carlo Bonaparte, named him Napoleon, meaning Lion of the Wilderness, as if to foreshadow the magnificent life he would lead. Although Napoleon's family was not a powerful one, they were able to provide him with a better-than-average education, and in 1777, Napoleon was sent to study French at the parochial school in Euthen. In 1784, Napoleon graduated with honors and was selected to attend the École d'Officiers in Paris, where he was trained as an artillery officer. However, his father died in 1785 and he had to complete a 2-year course in just 1 year because he lacked the financial resources to do so. In September 1785, he passed his graduation exams and received the rank of second lieutenant. Napoleon became the first Corsican to receive a degree from the École des Sous-Officiers in Paris. The great Napoleon, from the military barracks where he was stationed to the fertile ground of Enlightenment thought, the unique ideas of Rousseau paved the treasure of reading for him. When the heat of the French Revolution surged, he fell like a meteor into the arms of this movement. In Corsica, while the royalists, revolutionaries and independents competed for this world, Napoleon chose the Jacobins and became one of them, so that his life path was like a spring whirlpool pulled into the waves. He grew from an unknown soldier to a prominent soldier of the Revolution. In 1793, he showed his signature at the Battle of Toulon, leading the revolutionary soldiers to defend the Toulon shore batteries and successfully defeating the British fleet that attacked France to aid the Bourbons. Napoleon won the favor of the revolutionary government and became a brigadier general at the age of 24. He was widely noted for his close relationship with the Robespierre brothers during the coup d'état, but his personal convictions led him to refuse to take part in the quelling of the war against the Vaude, which led to his removal from the rank of general, for which he faced financial hardship and diminished career prospects. However, the wheel of history finally moved forward, and the armed rebellion launched by the Royalists in Paris in March 1795 saw the rebirth of Napoleon, who was reinstated to guard the Tuileries Palace. He commanded the cannons to wield the forces of justice, repulsing the challengers again and again, and finally opening the curtain perfectly on the Battle of the 13th of Portugal. Overnight, it brought Napoleon fame and fortune, and he was promoted to lieutenant general of the army and commander of the Paris garrison. In 1796, at the age of 26, Napoleon was appointed commander-in-chief of the Italian side of France, and as the Holy Roman Empire, Britain and Spain in Europe were very much afraid of the new French regime, they formed an anti-French alliance to fight together against the newborn republic. After marrying his lover Josefina de Beauharnais, he hurried to the front. It was in Italy that Napoleon began to demonstrate his extraordinary military brilliance. Napoleon's military brilliance shone like a diamond in the hot sun. He made artillery the melody of war and let the mobility of cavalry leap out on the battlefield. He led his armies over the Alps, defeated the Allied armies, captured Lodi, and then to Milan. From the siege of Mantua to the surrender of Austria, his military spirit danced like a dragon in the Tyrol. Eventually, his name, like the light of the rising sun, illuminated the history of France, causing Belgium and Italy to fall under the wings of France. Napoleon, who saved the day, became the new star of France with his prestige over the Italian campaign, and his flame burned so brightly that it sent chills down the spine of the governor, so he rose up with the slogan of cover, and pointed to Egypt in a different direction. He broke away from Paris on the pretext of marching into India, avoiding the government's defenses. When he led his expeditionary force to Egypt, he brought with him not only troops and weapons, but a thirst for knowledge and the unknown. His army included, in addition to 2,000 cannons, 175 scholars in various fields, as well as trunks full of books and research equipment. He ordered donkeys and scholars to walk in the middle of the ranks, showing the extremely high value he placed on knowledge and learning. His army not only discovered the Rosetta Stone, but also penetrated deep inside the pyramids to study the clay tablets' cuneiform writing. This action initiated the archaeological study of the ancient Egyptian civilization and made a significant contribution to world culture. War is always accompanied by sacrifice, and in 1797 he easily captured Malta and defeated the Mamluks in the port of Alexandria with a few victories. However, at the mouth of the Nile, Napoleon's fleet suffered heavy losses at the hands of the British Nelson. His supply lines were cut and one ship was sunk. When he returned home with the only 2 remaining ships, the heroic figure was already overwhelmed by exhaustion and frustration. At this time in Europe, dramatic historical events were quietly unfolding. The anti-French alliance was gradually forming in Europe, and the pressure on France was becoming more intense, while in France, royalist forces were gradually rising, bringing more complex challenges to the political situation in France. In these turbulent times, one figure decided to stand up for himself, Napoleon Bonaparte. In August of 1799, the young general made a decisive decision, to return to Paris. It was a decision that changed his fate and the course of history in France, and in Europe as a whole. When he returned to France in October, he was warmly welcomed by the people as a savior. His fame and influence soared, and his charisma and leadership made him a hero in the hearts of the people. However, this was only the beginning of his great career. On November 9, Napoleon staged the famous Foggy Moon coup, which was so successful that he became the first ruler of France. In fact, he became the dictator of France. This day marked the official ascension of Napoleon to the pinnacle of power and the beginning of his rule over France, Europe and the world. On the night of the tumultuous coup, he launched an unprecedented journey of political, educational, judicial, administrative, legislative, and economic reforms, with the goal of creating a new era, an era in which the light of reason would shine. He is most celebrated for the monument he created, the Napoleonic Code. This code, which bears witness to his lifelong wisdom and determination, is believed to have an impact on a wider range of countries and regions in the years to come. Every paragraph and every rule was the result of his thoughtful and careful discussions. To this day, this code remains at the forefront of law and is an important milestone in the evolution of French and world law. The result of the reform is not only a sublimation of the national system, but also another proof of his outstanding personal leadership. In the following year, 1802, a wave of history swept over France. An entirely new constitution, with unstoppable force, announced Napoleon Bonaparte's decision to rule for life. This change not only affected the functioning of the regime, but also heralded a larger change in the making. Less than 2 years later, in 1804, in November, France accepted an entirely new constitution, this time with even more significant changes. A referendum confirmed the entry into force of the 12-year Republican Constitution, marking the end of the First French Republic and the emergence of a new French Empire. Napoleon Bonaparte, a name that has left a deep mark on history, was honored as Napoleon I and became the Emperor of France. However, Napoleon was not satisfied with this. On December 2, he followed the history of Charlemagne and at the same time innovated his practices, a move that greatly reduced the discontent of the revolutionaries against him. More importantly, it was the first time that a French emperor took his name as emperor, which was undoubtedly Napoleon's highest interpretation of power. He was not crowned by the then Pope Pius VII, but personally placed the crown on his head and then crowned his wife Josephine de Beauharnais as empress, which was his best interpretation of supreme power. But it did not stop there. Just a year later, Napoleon was crowned again by the Pope in Italy and became King of Italy. This was yet another proof of his power and influence, and another milestone in his personal history. In 1805, while stabilizing the situation at home, Austria, England and Russia formed the Third Anti-French Alliance. Napoleon Bonaparte did not retreat, he responded to the challenge with action. He left Paris on September 24 and personally led his armies to conquer the East. It took him only 18 days to achieve victory in Munich. The wheels of history rolled forward, the Allies surrendered after the fierce Battle of Ulm, and the victory at the Battle of Austerlitz disintegrated the Anti-French League once again, and the dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire marked the dawn of a new era. In the hands of Napoleon, the German states united to form the Confederation of the Rhine, which he placed under his protection as a lion guarding his own people. After the formation of the Fourth Anti-French Alliance by Britain, Russia and Prussia, Napoleon struck again and won brilliant victories at Jena and Olstadt. The Prussian army was almost completely wiped out. He gained most of Germany and was recognized worldwide for his military prowess and strong leadership. In 1807, after defeating the Russian army in Poland, Napoleon met with Tsar Alexander I of Russia and the two sides signed a peace treaty. He promulgated the Edict of Berlin and announced the policy of continental blockade, which blocked all trade with England and henceforth established France's supremacy in continental Europe. However, Napoleon's ambition to conquer Europe did not stop here. At the end of 1807, Spain fell into internal unrest and the king was overthrown. Napoleon saw the opportunity to invade Spain and made his eldest brother, Joseph Bonaparte, King of Spain. However, the powerful Napoleonic army could not quell the Spanish resistance, and the fire of riots grew stronger and stronger. The following year, Britain stepped into the Spanish dispute, and on August 30, British troops occupied all of Portugal. This move not only forced Napoleon's 300,000 French troops to be unable to mobilize to the main battlefield on the Prussian front, but also to be unable to extricate themselves from the Spanish mud. The Anti-French Alliance, supported by local nationalists, gradually drove the French out of the Iberian Peninsula. Thus began the Peninsular War, which became the primary setback to Napoleon's expansionist power. In early 1809, the Fifth Anti-French Alliance came into being, and Austria took the opportunity to attack French territories in Germany. Napoleon was forced to abandon Spain and lead his army to the east to face the superior situation of Austria. However, Napoleon quickly turned the tide and forced Austria to cede land in the Vienna Peace Treaty, again allowing Napoleon to maintain his military superiority. The following year, he even formed an alliance with Austria and married the Austrian Princess Marie-Louise. However, in late 1811, Napoleon's relations with the Russian Empire began to deteriorate sharply. Tsar Alexander I refused to continue to cooperate with France against the British, which in turn led to the Russo-French War. Napoleon invaded Russia with a huge army consisting of many languages. The Russian army adopted a strategy of holding the line in order to force the French into a corner. However, the French army finally entered Moscow on September 12, 1812, in the face of a difficult retreat and the enormous losses caused by the scorched earth policy. Napoleon expected that Moscow would welcome his compromise and surrender. However, he was in a desperate situation. The city of Moscow burst into flames, and he was greeted with ruin and destruction. At the same time, another failed coup d'état was planned at home, forcing Napoleon to return to France and bring back the only 20,000 men left. In 1813, Britain, Russia, Prussia and Austria joined forces to form the Sixth Anti-French Alliance against Napoleon, the Emperor of France. Despite a string of victories in the early stages of the war, the pressure on Napoleon grew as time went on until the Battle of Leipzig in October, when the French army was routed and the vassal states gained independence from France. On March 31, 1814, a historic day, the Allies occupied Paris and demanded the unconditional surrender of France, which also meant that Napoleon had to abdicate. In this Europe-wide war, Napoleon's fate was settled. On April 13, Napoleon signed his abdication edict at the Fontainebleau Palace in Paris. Napoleon was then exiled to the island of Elba, an island in the Mediterranean Sea. And in Paris, Louis XVIII regained the throne, marking the restoration of the Bourbons. A change of power, the demise of an empire, a moment in which the wheels of history turned with a deep and feverish intensity. In 1815, a major twist of fate shook Europe once again. In just 100 days, from the triumphal return to the desperate loss, everything was like a dream. On February 26, Napoleon, who had been exiled to Elba, suddenly sneaked back to France, as if the phoenix had risen again. The troops sent by Louis XVIII did not attack him, but became his greeters. In a Game of Thrones, Napoleon regained power and Louis XVIII fled to a foreign country. However, the good times did not last long. On June 18, the bells of history rang out on the battlefield of Waterloo. Under the leadership of the Duke of Wellington of England and Field Marshal Gebhard Liebrecht von Blücher of Prussia, the anti-French Allied forces dealt Napoleon a fatal blow here, which was the famous Battle of Waterloo. On July 15, he surrendered again and was exiled to St. Helena, a small island in the Atlantic Ocean. The rise and fall of glory and disgrace in 100 days was enough to make the world jaw-dropping. 100 Days of Napoleon, an image portraying Napoleon, once an awe-inspiring figure, now fallen on the somber battlefield, his eyes reflecting the short-lived glory of his return and ultimate defeat. The battlefield, once a place of victorious cheers, is now a site of ruin and desolation. Under threatening, cloud-laden skies signaling the end of an era, the scene is immersed in an overwhelming sense of transition. From the height of euphoria to the depths of despair, photography, a telephoto lens capture, the narrow depth of field focuses on Napoleon with the devastated battlefield blurred in the distance, showing his isolation. Despite his forced loss of power and rule, he maintained a unique belief in himself. Whereas escape might be considered a departure from his great cause, refusal to flee was his steadfast commitment to the mission and philosophy he sought. In 1821, the flame of Napoleon's life slowly began to die out. On the distant island of St. Helena, the conqueror who had swept through Europe, his health was deteriorating. Finally, on May 5, he took his final journey on the island in silence.